So now, as part of the first award, I'd like to present Felipe Galindo. Like I said before, he's a Mexican artist, political cartoonist. He has collaborated with NACLA, and he's also a friend of Eduardo del Rio Rius, who we will be awarding tonight with the Conciencia del Pueblo Award.
Así que les doy de verdad las gracias por este premio inmerecido. Siempre se dice eso, ya están acostumbrados a él. Hace 45 años me di cuenta de que no todos los gringos eran como los de nuestras pesadillas, que había gringos buenos, que había gringos que se interesaban por nuestros países, no únicamente para explotarlos, sino para conocerlos. Y esos gringos buenos, entre ellos están los que hacen NACLA, los que se preocupan por tender un puente de conocimiento entre Estados Unidos y América Latina. Y les deseo muchísimos más éxitos, que lleguen a los 50 años por lo menos.
I'm going to forgive my English with an accent, but it's mixed with Nahuatl. Okay. Okay, my name is Felipe Galindo Gomez, which compressed makes Fego, my pen name. Unless you have a name that sounds like a pseudonym, it's a tradition among cartoonists in Latin America to come up with one in order to avoid using our regular boring names. I'm a Mexican cartoonist, illustrator, and visual artist living now in New York City. Tonight I'd like to say a few words about my colleague and friend, the well-known Mexican cartoonist Rius, nom de plume of Eduardo del Rio, to whom the National Congress of Latin America, known by its pen name NACLA, presents him La Conciencia del Pueblo Award in recognition for his invaluable work defending the underprivileged, indigenous people, and migrant workers, among others. The first time I heard about Rius was in 1968 at my grandfather's home in Cuernavaca, Mexico. We had just arrived a few weeks earlier after living in El Salvador for the past 5 years, and I had no idea what was going on in Mexico. My uncle Andres was telling my family, "Have any of you read the comics Los Supermachos? It's a riot, very funny, and lampoons very well the political apparatus. Felipe, you like comics, take a look." For me, an 11-year-old kid more used to reading Superman or Batman, Los Supermachos seemed like a third world comics. This is not a serious comic book, I said to myself. It only talks about politics and features regular people from provincial towns in real-life situations that I see around me every day. What's so funny about that? A few years later, a friend in junior high told me, "Have you ever read the new comics Los Agachados by Rius? You should check it out." This time I took the advice seriously. Why not? It was coming from a friend who introduced me to the first Led Zeppelin album when I was still listening to the Beatles. This better be good, I said. And in fact it was. Not good, terrific. The issue I bought was about Coca-Cola and all the behind-the-scenes industry of Mexico's favorite drink. It blew my innocent mind. How could this guy say all those things against such a powerful company and with facts and humor? After that, I became an avid reader of his comics and a fan of his cartoons. I had the honor of meeting Rius in person in the mid-70s when I was a young aspiring cartoonist. His work was very influential, and it made me want to become a cartoonist myself because of its simplicity and smart irreverence, using comics as a fun way to voice your opinions. Many other cartoonists in Latin America could say the same. I began doing cartoons while I was in college, and after graduating, I began to contribute with several Mexican publications. Years later, we became colleagues at the influential humorous magazine La Garrapata. It means the thick. And good friends and pen pals after I moved to New York City in 1983, and now we are cyber pals, if such a word exists. Rius was born in 1934 in Michoacán, Mexico. His story is a very peculiar one. Who would have imagined that a young, disillusioned former seminary student working later at a funeral home would end up being an inspiration to millions and a cornerstone of the freedom of the press in Mexico? These days, we take it for granted, but in Mexico in the 1960s and up to the 80s, and unfortunately lately once again, to speak of your mind was very, very risky. Early in his formative years, Rius was inspired by a couple of Mexican cartoonists, and oddly enough, by American cartoonists as well, in particular by the simple and modern style of the Romanian Saul Steinberg of the New Yorker magazine. Rius began to draw gag cartoons in the mid-60s while working at that funerary home, and through a series of serendipitous opportunities, he ended up drawing political cartoons for various newspapers. He was fired many times because of his irreverent and provocative humor, until he finally created his own comic books, Los Supermachos, which satirized the Mexican civil society, its way of life, the political scene, religion, class society, manners, and costumbrismo. After 2 years, and due to government pressure, Los Supermachos editor gave Rius a coup d'etat in which he fired him, stole the characters, and even the name of the comics he created, and began to publish the magazine behind his back, made by a team of hired hands. On top of that, the government of President Díaz Ordaz, who didn't like Rius' popular humor, took offense, and in early 1969 ordered the army to kidnap him. He was dragged to a military base where he was led to believe he would be executed. He was freed thanks to the intervention of a former president who fortunately was his distant relative, Lázaro Cárdenas del Río, the last decent president Mexico has ever had since Benito Juárez. This incident didn't deter him, and Rius continued to work on his recently created comics Los Agachados. It means the stooped ones, a word used in Mexico to refer to those who don't assert their rights or don't rock the boat. The difference this time was that Rius mixed Mexican politics with other topics relevant to our society, like consumerism, religion, TV, advertising, food, socialism, sex, China, El Che, philosophy, medicine, religion, history, education, etc., etc. He covered around 200 different topics during Los Agachados' existence until 1977. He revived it briefly in 78 and in 81. Later on, he expanded on those topics through full-length books, and so far he has published around 130 titles. His first one was Cuba for Beginners, and later on, Marx for Beginners. This ticked off the For Beginners series, which was widely imitated, translated, and copied, sometimes with his permission and many, many times without it or without proper royalty payments. While he was being an advocate for socialism, Rius has been also very critical of U.S. economic, political, and cultural hegemony, its merciless capitalism, obsessive anti-communism, and its interventionism, in particular in Latin America, always using the iconic Uncle Sam figure to convey his critique. He fiercely denounced how Mexico's ruling party for 75 years, the PRI, betrayed the social justice goals of the Mexican Revolution and failed the Mexican people with its endemic corruption and lack of democracy for so many years. To this day, he continues to express and defend his point of view. And when he changed it, as he did when he broke with the Cuban Revolution and the socialist world, despite still having faith in socialism, he will give you the reasons for changing his mind, using facts and in a funny and smart way. To end, I'll quote loosely from the late great Mexican writer Carlos Monsiváis. Rius opened up a space for democratic critical expression, using comics as political persuade, breaking the established molds of cartooning. His was a critical vision through simple lines and humor, demystifying without being pedagogic, but with a didactic value nevertheless. He put to good use a form of popular culture used to distract until then, to politicize and criticize, something rarely seen in comics in Mexico. He used stereotypes to make a massive lesson of criticism of the system because they were very effective and everybody could relate to them. Simplicity and clear facts exposure are among his high marks and reason why he is so popular. What I still don't understand is why we Mexicans demand more of him despite all he has given us.